G'day, I'm Bruce, and today I'm going to do a video update on the fire truck. For all those that are interested, the radiator had one hole in it. By the time I flushed it, it had 6 holes in it, so things weren't going too well. So we made our mind up the rest of the truck was good enough that we thought, right, we'll get the radiator re-cored. So the radiator came out, off to the radiator doctor to get a new core put in it. As you can see here, it's had a beautiful job done on it. So, you know, nice looking radiator, shouldn't have any more problems. And the other thing was to get the cowling. Seeing as the radiator looked so good, I thought, well, the cowling looked pretty surface rusty. So what I did, I got one of these discs from Bunnings. It's called a strip it disc. So I got that on there and ripped most of the old paint and surface rust off, which did an excellent job. And then I couldn't really get into the corners. You can see here where, I guess that's how it's made in the factory. They've just rolled it over and spot welded or soldered it. So I couldn't get in all the corners. I couldn't get around the edges with that disc. So I got my old sandblaster that I've had for about 40 years, little sandblast, and got in and sandblasted all the edges and all the corners where it was very hard to get at. And then put on the chassis paint. I thought, well, chassis paint, you know, looks pretty good. So whacked a coat of chassis paint on. And then while I was at it, I thought, well, the pipe looked like it needed a clean. And I didn't know how good it was on the end, so we're going to put new hoses on it. We've got the new hoses there. Gates hose there and heavy duty hose here. So I went around, got the ends, sanded them back, buffed them with a wire brush, sanded them again, belled them out just slightly on the anvil, not much, you'd probably be going to even pick it. Cold gal on here, some heat proof extractor paint on here, just to make it look nice. The pipe's in very good condition, which I was surprised about. So that'll go onto there. We've just got to put the radiator back in, try and work out the right angle, which I think it's going to go like that onto the vehicle and that onto the radiator. If I've got everything lined up right, it's probably going to go on about like that, I hope. And I can still move these hoses around, even though the paint's probably a little bit sticky. But the hard part's going to be trying to get the radiator back up. The radiator's got to go back up, and then the mounts are further forward. So as it's in its right position, it's got to go forward, and then bolts go in the bottom. There's my little dog Jax. He likes to be in part of the action. And Jax, there's a long-haired Jack Russell. That's where the name Jax comes from. And as you can see, he can probably smell a rat or a mouse, or he can smell something's been around here. I always flush the block when I'm on a job like this. And here's my radiator flusher here that I made about 40 years ago. And if you want to see how it works, I've done another video when I blew out the old radiator, when I caused all the extra leaks in it. So anyway, what I did today for an experiment, I thought I'll just put a pillowcase around where the bottom hose goes onto the water pump, and I just put that on there and I just cable tied it off like that. And I thought, right, I'll start from the top and I'll blast from the top down on the top hose, on like the top thermostat housing where it goes onto the head, and then I'll catch all the rust in this. Anyway, by the time I'd given it about 3 shots, this was full of water, and there was that much rust and dirt came out of the block that this just blew up like a big balloon and just blew straight off the water pump. So as it landed on the ground, most of the rust and dirt came out because it was just like completely blown up with water, and then splat when it hit the ground. So this will give you a bit of an idea. There's not much left in here now compared to what there was. You can just see all this dirt and rust and everything that's in there. Get out of it. Go on, Jax, get out of it. He thinks it's something to eat, or he thinks there's a critter there. So you can just see there would have been a lot more than that in there too, so it was enough to actually block up the There's enough to block up the pillowcase, and that'll give you a bit of an idea what was in it. And there would have been a lot more than that too, just rust and dirt over the years. So all that sort of stuff can all sit on like the small holes in the head gasket and make a motor run hot. So when I finished, I got some rainwater and poured back through everything to make sure everything, and then I got my compressed air and my 40-year-old sandblaster and blew back down through the top hose to blow most of the water out, because there's always water laying around the cylinders. We want all that water out, so we blew as much water out as we possibly could till no water was coming out at all, but who knows, there could have still been a bit left. So we're going to use Hino truck coolant. That seems to be a pretty good product, and anything they make is going to be good. We managed to get a thermostat housing to suit a 350 Chev, which just fitted on there perfectly, and if the angle was any different, I couldn't pick it. It looked like it was going to work really well. The old thermostat housing was really corroded out. Once I pull the old thermostat housing off, you can see where the thermostat itself had actually fallen apart. There were bits and pieces just laying down in in the end of the cylinder head. So I very carefully plucked them out with some pointy nose pliers and got the other thermostat housing, a new gasket. I've got a new thermostat there I'll put back in. At the moment there's no thermostat in there because you can't have a thermostat in there and flash the block. You really need to pull the thermostat out to get the job done properly. We'll throw the radiator in now before it gets too late, and that'll be another job done, and after that we'll be able to put the thermostat back in the housing. And quite a heavy radiator, so it's going to take a fair bit of effort to try and get it back up and into place and get the bottom bolts in, I think, to start with, to make it safe so it can't fall down. So that's going to be the next move, to see if we can get this radiator in. We'll probably take one person underneath and one person up the top. We're just going to put these rubbers on the side of the radiator so it gets maximum amount of air going through the cowling. Without these on, air can escape around the sides. So we're going to put these on, and the radiator man actually pulled them off, so it's a bit of a challenge. I think they can only go on one way, but I'll try and plug these onto there if I can get them right. I've got a bit of grease on there to try and help them go on. Well, that wasn't too bad. If I can get them started, it's probably the hardest part, is to get them started. I might need a screwdriver to get that one started. No, that's got it. And you can't put these on later on, so they must go on now. A truck like this, if it's going to be running around through the bush, and especially if it's going to be fighting fires or anything like that, or anything off road, you need all this sort of stuff to be working really well. Otherwise, if they get bogged and everything, whether in a stationary mode working hard, well, next thing they'll boil if that cowling and that fan that can't work properly. This one's playing hard to get. It should go. Yep, it's on there. Rightio. One side done, we've got the other side to go. And this one little duva here is bent, so I'm going to have to... Maybe it missed last time they put it back on there. I'll go and get something and see if I can straighten that out and make it look like these other ones. Never get them started. I don't want to put too much grease on there, it'll rot the rubber. So it's just one of those sort of things. The rubber's pretty old and hard, so don't want to take too many risks. A bit of grease in there won't do any harm. A little bit of rubbed in around there, which is nearly nothing. Righto, I guess we'll start at the top. Get my torch there. Yep. Right. Looks like it's a funny idea, but I suppose back then some brainy person invented them, I guess. Obviously they've been there for all those years. You beauty. So we've got them on now. The other one on the other side. Those little wire clips. Doesn't the new coil look good? Certainly pretty heavy, a fair bit of weight on that radiator. But I suppose if it's a four-wheel drive vehicle, well, I suppose they want the radiator to be in pretty good nick. Keep it all cool. I've got to lift it up, I've got to sit it on top of these rubbers. There's two rubbers there, so the radiator's got to go up and it's got to come forward. Rest on here. Obviously it's been looked after pretty well, because I thought I may have trouble undoing those bolts, but when the bolts come out they already had a bit of anti-seize on them. No trouble at all, they came undone. And the other thing I wondered when I went to undo the thermostat housing, I thought, here's a go. Thermostat housing, it's not the first time the bolts have been snapped off in them. It can be a major job then to try and build them up with weld, a little bit at a time. Vice grips, working backwards and forwards. Who knows, you might be there for 10 minutes, you might be there for 3 hours before you get the broken off bolts out, if you have a good run. And I put a 1/2-inch spanner on the thermostat housing bolts, just undid like that. Beauty. So obviously the last person that did that job must have put anti-seize on the threads, which is what I always like to do. Even if I think I'm not going to do the job next time, I always think of the next person. The next person's got to front up and do these sort of things. If the bolts will undo on a thing like that, easy job. Well, the radiator's in, the bolts in the bottom are in place, so it can't really fall down and cause any trouble. We've got those rubber wings on the side, make sure that the air is going to get sucked through the radiator core and not sucked through beside the radiator. So that's the hardest part of the job, I think. The rest of it will be just putting these like stabilizer rods and that on, like to stop the top of the radiator moving backwards and forwards. Basically it's sitting on the all the weight will be sitting on the bottom part. I guess in something like this where it goes off road, everything's going to be twisting and moving around, so they don't have the radiator bolted up on the sides or on the top as such. They just have those couple of rods with rubber mounts on the side, rubber mounts on the bottom. And I guess if the old radiator had, I don't know how many years it would have done, but possibly a lot. Might have even been the original one, we don't know. So, you know, Bedford must have had all that stuff worked out a long time ago, so that they didn't, you know, didn't crack the mountings on the radiator or anything, or the radiator itself. So it looks like there it is anyway, nice shiny black radiator. The cowl's painted up, the metal part on the bottom hose is painted up. Just a matter of putting the cowl and the fan and the bits and pieces on. This here's the thing that works the gears. Gear linkage setup. There's a setup on the floor there, as you can see. There's a big rubber boot and that on it. We're out here working by torchlight at the moment, so probably had enough for the day. And tomorrow will be another day. I'll try and do some more on it tomorrow. I'm back here for another round on the four-wheel drive Bedford fire truck. I've got the fan painted up today. Another little job done. And the bottom radiator hose consists of 3 pieces. I've got it on there now. Bit of a jigsaw puzzle to work out what length to set everything at. And we've just got to try and fit that cowl in now. The cowl's got to go back, and the fan goes on, and the cowl goes forward. And it's going to be quite complicated. It has 3 bolts on either side of the cowl to hold it on. It looks like there's hardly any room to get in there and work on them. You can see a shut down there. Thermostat's also been fitted, and you can see that radiator pipe. It actually looked like it went on the other way, but it didn't. It's got to go on that way. We've got to go down on the inside of the on the wings on the radiator, and we don't want to go dinging up that new core. And it is going to be just the tightest fit. It's got to be. We're very close. It's got to be somewhere around about there. Next up, we've got to put the fan on. It only has 1/4 inch bolts too, which I thought was a bit strange. But we've got to put the fan on next, and then tighten it, and then bring the cowl forward. And it's going to be very difficult to get those other bolts on the holes on the side of the cowl. But I suppose that's the way it's got to go. I don't think there's any shortcuts about it. Started, which is good. Pretty rare having a an engine that only has 1/4 inch bolts holding the fan on. Everything I've ever worked on, I think it's had 5/16, but that's how they are. Give that a bit of a jiggle around as we put the bolts in. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Here we are. They're only small, so I won't overdo them. Feels good. Right, the next move is to try and get that. I think I might have to take this here brace. It's probably got to come off, I think. It's going to have to go in behind there. And then we've got these little tiny They're nearly like a wood screw. They've got a blade in them. They have got a blade in them for a screwdriver. Yep. They look like they're probably about 5/16 to 8 mil. I've got to get around the other side of that bracket. Might have it now. Little baby screw. I've got it or not. No. The torch. It's got to come right up. Well, after a bit of a fight, we've got the cowling on there. Not an easy job, but it's on there now, so we can move to putting those braces on to stop it moving backwards and forwards at the top. That'll be the next move. The whole top of the radiator is supported by these rods and rubbers. The rubbers down in here, rods up here. I'll have to twist that around and put that through here. Same thing on the other side over there. Exactly the same thing. That stops that moving backwards and forwards. Underneath is a simple idea, just 2 bolts coming up from underneath. That's a great idea. That part works pretty good, but it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle to put it back in, and you know, without dinging the radiator. Not so bad when you're pulling an old had-it radiator out, but when you're putting a new one in, well, you don't want to be bending the fins up or causing any damage. If we can get another grip on there. That looks pretty good. Well, radiator's in there now. I'll just go down and tighten up the bottom bolts, the vertical bolts underneath. That's got that job done, and we're just going to have to figure out the top hose. And I don't know whether we're going to hook up the header tank yet. The old header tank's pretty hatted on it, so I don't know whether it's full of mud or what, but after what was in the engine block, I'm not real keen to hook it up until we have a real good look at it. I don't know whether they're still available in Australia. I guess they're probably available over in England. Just going to tighten up these bolts on the bottom. A bit of crushing the rubber. We've got those vertical bolts up here. They're not meant to be really over tightened. They've actually got a hole, if we can find it, actually got a hole going through the bolt. And from the look of it, it's supposed to be wired, probably a wire seal that goes through here and back through that hole. The same here, so that way you don't have to really flatten those rubbers out. Everything's got to be able to jiggle and move around a bit if you're on a rough road. You know, snapping the radiator frame on the outside or anything. So they should be probably slacking off a little bit more, because there's a fair bit of crush on those rubbers. A bit of wire put through there, twitched off, and that'll be pretty good. And we've got our bottom hose and everything on over here. I've actually stuck 2 clamps up in there. I don't know whether you can see that up in there where I'm pointing. They're nearly impossible to get at up in here. So I've stuck 2 clamps up in there to screws facing outwards, but there's not much room there because that's actually facing inside the C-section on the chassis. So you want to hope you never had to retighten them. So I'll put 2 clamps on up in there to be sure. And all these other clamps here, I've run them in and out on the vise and put a bit of grease on the inside of them. And who knows, in the future, might not be me trying to undo them, but I always think of the next mechanic or the next person that's got to come along and work on all this stuff. If everything's been lubed up a bit, makes the job a whole lot easier. Got the hoses back on. We're just going to put some of this Hino truck coolant in there to make sure there's no more rust. It's too heavy for me to just pick up, too awkward. If I was out in the paddock I'd be right. Probably going to take a few litres too. She should be right for a fair while. Good coolant in there. Don't spill it. Just the radiator itself is going to take a few litres, I think. Well, we know the block's clean anyway. Thermostat's got a little valve in it, which is good. They went back to that idea. For a while I just used to have a little tiny dimple to let the air out beside the main, well, what would we call it, the main plunger thing. And then it mustn't have worked out too good, so they went back to the old idea where they had the little valve thing there. Not much room to work here. A few bubbles. I think I can hear it going past the thermostat. Sometimes you can cheat a bit, squeeze the hose a bit. Just get this light here, if I can get it. Have a look down the neck. Yep, I think it's probably pretty right. Let's put a little tiny bit more in. And I reckon that will probably do. Probably have to have a bit more put in after it's been run for a while. There's not much left in the container. And there's our radiator cap. Just have another look down its neck. I think the older Bedfords only had about a 4-pound cap on them. Yep, I can see fluid in there. Right, new cap. Right, so we just got to rig up our gear linkages and all that business on there. I hope we can still bolt all that on now we've got everything else bolted on. Wouldn't be too good if we've got to start pulling stuff off again. to bolt it on, but oh well, it's got that done. It's another job fixed, I suppose. New radiator, new thermostat housing, engine flush, couple of new radiator hoses, the bottom steel radiator hose, well, rubber either end, steel in the middle, all sanded down, coal gal on the ends, painted with black in the middle. Sometime on the weekend I might try and put the gear linkages and that back on and take it for a drive. There should be enough stuff back on it, you know, by the time I put all the linkages and that back on for the gears. So that might be the end of this video, and maybe if all goes to plan, next video I might be driving it around. Until the next video, thanks very much for watching.